In my last video, I talked about recent criminal justice reform in New York State and showed some examples of the unintended consequences of the new bail reform law. Under the new law, judges are no longer able to set bail for a long list of over 150 misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. And one of the biggest issues of the bail reform law is that it stripped judges of making determinations on pre-trial sentencing. So in most cases, instead of being able to set bail or hold someone in custody, you have mandatory release. And that's contributing to a large spike in crime and repeat offenders. A prime example of the no bail fail is Anthony Manson. On December 23, 2019, he was arrested for 9 alleged burglaries earlier in the month, including this New York Avenue building on December 20th, where he threw a large rock through this glass door and stole Amazon packages. 2 days after his arrest, he was released because burglary in the second degree isn't a crime eligible for bail and comes with a mandatory release. After his release, Manson was arrested for allegedly committing 6 more break-ins on January 2nd and 3rd. Prosecutors sought to have him held on $15,000 bail, but instead, he was freed on supervised release. During this supervised release, he broke into the same New York Avenue building on January 7th. On January 15th, he was arrested for breaking into a high-end eyewear store in Chelsea. Cops caught him in the store with the rock used to break the glass door, and a suitcase filled with nearly $4,000 of sunglasses. Despite multiple charges of burglary, criminal mischief, petty larceny, and criminal possession, he was released again. According to the New York Daily News, Manson was quoted as saying, "I'm surprised. I could never make bail before. I always had to take the alternative, a program or jail." Remember, Manson was caught inside the eyewear store with a suitcase filled with thousands of dollars in sunglasses and a giant rock that he used to break into the store, so it's hard for advocates to make a legitimate argument that he shouldn't be sitting in jail. But they're gonna try anyway. Redmond Haskins, a spokesman for the Legal Aid Society, said the court was right to release our client for this non-violent offense instead of remanding him to a cage at Rikers Island. Non-violent offense, more like 16 non-violent offenses that we know of, but who's counting? Pre-trial incarceration of people who are presumed innocent based solely on their poverty benefits neither those accused nor public safety. So in other words, if the judge was able to set bail, Barry wouldn't have been able to afford it, and by remaining in custody, he wouldn't be free to commit any more burglaries. But the Legal Aid Society is saying that less crime equals less public safety? Yeah. And it should be no surprise that he was arrested again on January 22nd for burglarizing a construction site and giving a fake name to police. And with that, Manson was finally ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. According to the New York Post, the Legal Aid Society spokesman said, "What this case does underscore is the absence of critically needed services in our city and a resulting failure to meet the needs of so many of our clients and other New Yorkers. The only failure here is the ability to keep a serial burglar in custody." Then there's the case of Jorge Flores Villalba, who struck and killed a mother of 3 who was crossing the street in Stony Point. Flores Villalba fled the scene because he was afraid of getting caught for driving without a license. After he was arrested, he was released because while leaving the scene of an accident involving a fatal injury is a felony, it's not a crime that's eligible for bail. Thankfully, ICE stepped in a few days later to make an arrest and take him into custody. And not only was he driving without a license, but he was in the country illegally. Yet he wasn't detained and immediately reported to immigration officials for being unlawfully present in the United States because New York is a sanctuary state. But that's a video for another time. Then there's Charles Barry, who has been to prison 6 different times and according to the Daily News, had been arrested 138 times. On January 19th, he allegedly stole $50 out of a woman's hand at the 42nd Street Bryant Park subway station. Instead of being arrested, he was given a desk appearance ticket. And when Barry missed his court appearance, a warrant was put out for his arrest, his 139th arrest. And I'm sure you can guess what happened next. Yes, he was released on his own recognizance, and that's why Barry yelled the following to a Daily News reporter. "I'm famous. I take $200, $300 a day of your money, cracker. You can't stop me. Bail reform, it's lit. It's the Democrats. The Democrats know me, and the Republicans fear me. You can't touch me. I can't be stopped." Then he was arrested for the 140th time after he ripped off a tourist, selling her a MetroCard that didn't work. The Legal Aid Society said in a statement to the Daily News, "The NYPD is clearly hell-bent on pinning any wrongdoing on Mr. Barry. This most recent allegation screams of blatant profiling consistent with the NYPD's crusade to criminalize Mr. Barry." Except for the fact that Barry was arrested for a 141st time after he ripped off an other tourist, telling her that he worked for the MTA and sold her an expired MetroCard. Barry was arrested and held on $10,000 bail, which the judge should be allowed to do since he missed a bunch of his court dates, but another judge stepped in and released him. And again, in a statement, the Legal Aid Society tries to demonize the NYPD and the justice system. Mr. Barry was repeatedly denied due process and held illegally on bail at Rikers Island for several days awaiting a hearing. That's a lie, because Barry was being held because he wasn't showing up to his scheduled court appearances so he could receive that due process. No one benefits when our clients who are meeting their obligation to return to court are detained pre-trial. The prosecutors only attempted to set bail after Barry repeatedly failed to show up to court. And if you haven't noticed by now, the Legal Aid Society is full of it. Not to mention that days later, Barry was arrested for the 142nd time. But don't worry everyone, this time is different. Because Charles Barry told the Daily News in an interview that he's swearing off crime. And I'm sure that we can take him at his word. I'm glad this all worked out. Now, bail reform advocates like those at the Vera Institute of Justice argue that the new laws are just fine and shouldn't be changed.
There's been pushback from many who say that bail reform has gone too far. And they're using isolated events and high-profile cases to ask for rollbacks. The problem with those rollbacks is that it sends us back to where we were before.
But most bail reform opponents are not asking for rollbacks. What they are asking for is allowing a judge to make pre-trial determinations. So when someone like Charles Barry doesn't appear in court, but in the meantime is continuing to commit crimes, a judge can keep that person in custody because it's a public safety issue.
Crime and public safety has remained the same.
Now, if you've been paying attention, you know that that's bullshit. In the first 2.5 months of 2020, robbery is up 33.9%, felonious assault 9.9%, burglary 26.5%, grand larceny 15.8%, and auto theft is up 68%. Overall, it's a 20% jump in crime.
And New York has saved tons of money that they would otherwise have used to detain people.
Oh, well, if we're saving money, then by all means. And I can take that money and put it towards fixing the glass on my door and reordering the packages that were stolen. It's totally a win-win. Now, criminal defense lawyers like Norman Reamer argue against pretrial detention and insist that releasing suspects back on the street is the better solution.
If it's a low-level crime, then they're not going to be eligible for bail. But if an individual was released and they reoffend, then the judge can put other conditions on them in order to manage the situation.
New York Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie gives an example of the conditions that someone can receive for getting arrested for a low-level crime.
Based on the crime that they've been charged, like say on a burglary, on the one small instance of burglary too, where people are not being charged bail, where there was no interaction with a person, no person was injured, you know, in incidences like that, based on it being a flight risk, the courts can determine, we want you to have a curfew, you can only go to work and come back home.
Guys, if someone gets caught breaking into your home and stealing your property, don't worry. They will be released and they can only go to work. If they break that curfew, they'll be in real trouble. And keep in mind that it was just one small instance of second-degree burglary. No one was physically injured, so stop acting like a victim.
When people are languishing in jail, they lose their job, they become displaced from their families families become unemployed.
I'm not sure how many of these burglars have a job, outside of burglaring.
The less people are incarcerated, there's less of an opportunity, and the less statistically that people will commit another crime.
Hasty is ignoring the fact that arrests are made on probable cause, not on mere suspicion. So if someone is held in pretrial detention, it's because of strong evidence, extensive criminal history, or they were a danger to public safety. According to the NYPD, in the first 2 months of 2020, 482 people charged with a felony were released without bail, only to be rearrested for new crimes 846 times. Bail reform should be for first-time offenders for real low-level crimes like graffiti, shoplifting, petty larceny, not for people who repeatedly burglarize stores and apartment buildings or non-violently rob people of their money. So if you're a New Yorker, call Assembly Speaker Hasty's office and ask why he's more concerned with the well-being of criminals over crime victims and public safety. You'll be glad you did. And with that, thanks for watching, sharing, and hitting that like button. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Check out the links in the description and check out these videos that you may have missed. Thanks again for stopping by, and stay safe, everyone. Hope to see you next time.